the great Disney animated classics, which were extraordinarily influential, popular productions. And one of the movies that has struck me most particularly, although I don't think it's the greatest of the Disney movies, is Pinocchio. And there are a number of, so Pinocchio is a puppet. So someone is pulling his strings, right? There's forces behind the scenes that are making him who he is, and he's unconscious. He doesn't know it. But he has a good father, who is a very positive figure, who sends him out in the world to free himself of the behind the strings marionette players. And he faces a number of temptations. And there's 4 cardinal temptations, which I think are extremely well laid out. One is hedonism, narrow and shallow hedonism. And that's played out in the scenes of Pleasure Island. And the consequences of becoming a narrow hedonist is that you end up as a voiceless slave. That's how that, you end up turned into a donkey that can do nothing but bray, sold as slaves to work in the salt mine. So that's the fruits of hedonism. Another scene that perplexed me for a long time was that Pinocchio is enticed into being an actor. And I thought, what in the world does that mean? Because the people who made this movie were obviously Hollywood types, and what's so wrong with being an actor? But the answer is to be found in the discussion that we were just having. If you're playing a role and you're doing it as a fictional character, and you're playing a role in a movie, let's say, and everyone knows that what you're doing is fictional, that's one thing. But if you're an actor who's attempting to play a role for your own egotistical gratification, then that's a catastrophe. And what happens in the Pinocchio movie is that he is enticed into going on stage as a puppet, and he does a wild dance and tangles himself up in his own strings and ends up face down in front of the crowd, and then also enslaved. One of the other temptations, just interestingly enough, because it's germane to our current culture, is that the fox and the cat, who are agents of Mephistopheles, essentially also entice Pinocchio into playing the sick victim. And so that's actually how they entice him originally to go to Pleasure Island to become hedonistic. They tell him that he's sick and unable and has been victimized and needs a break. And as a consequence of his poor victimized position, it's perfectly okay for him to be narrowly and self-servingly hedonistic. And so it's a lovely narrative layout of the sort of plethora of moral problems that beset people as they try to transform themselves, let's say, into real boys, because of course that's what the movie's about. And it's very interesting to sketch out the nature of those temptations, this acting temptation. You see celebrities become their own mimics. Like Elvis, in some sense, became an Elvis imitator by the time that he ended, he came to near the end of his life. I mean, he could still put on a wicked performance, but you could see that immense pressure, the category pressure building around him. And you can imagine how intense that is, especially perhaps at the time he lived, because he was a singular celebrity. There's lots of celebrities now, but there were much fewer back then. And the pressure to abide by the way you've been defined must be almost overwhelming. And it isn't obvious that we really know how to rectify that. I think the confession idea is a good one, is that you need to keep your inadequacies foremost in your mind, and you need to serve some principles that are higher than yourself. But that's easy to say in the abstract. It's not so easy to actually do it when you're the one being tempted.